Good day, classmates. My topic is all about partnerships still under the phase of planning, and it will further discuss partnering and strategic alliances. So, in the realm of total quality management, partnerships play a pivotal role in fostering collaboration, sharing knowledge, and driving continuous improvement. That by establishing strategic alliances with both internal and external stakeholders, organizations can gain diverse expertise, resources, and perspectives to achieve their quality goals. Ultimately, effective partnerships can enhance innovation, reduce costs, and improve customer satisfaction, leading to organizational excellence. My name is Engineer Joseph Paulo A. Geronimo, and I will present the information needed to facilitate partnering relationships with suppliers, customers, internal units, and potential competitors. The simplest way to understand the concept of partnering or the strategic alliance is to think of it as working together for mutual benefit. So we have this figure showing those who work together may be suppliers, fellow employees, customers, and even businesses that are potential competitors. The maximum benefits of partnering are realized when all parties in the chain of partners cooperate. We have these two illustrations here representing the traditional supplier-customer chain in which each link in the chain operates independently. So suppliers operates independently with customer or the manufacturer and also within the end users or the customers of the manufacturer. So there's this invisible wall that separates them. On the other hand, contemporary supplier chain, the walls are removed and the overlapping portions represents partnering. So we have these suppliers coincided with customer or the manufacturer and also within the end users or the customers of the manufacturer. So these two illustrations depict relationships between external suppliers and customers. These same models are repeated numerous times within companies in which employees are internal suppliers and internal customers to each other. The types of partnering relationships explained earlier must also occur within total quality companies. To put it simply, in traditional supplier-customer relationships, there are invisible walls that block out communication and cooperation. Unlike in the contemporary supplier-customer relationships, these walls are broken down so there is communication, input, feedback, and cooperation. Several benefits can be derived from partnering. So partnering can lead to continual improvements in such key areas as processes and products, relationships between customers and suppliers, and customer satisfaction. Internal partnering can improve relationships among employees and among departments within an organization. So when taken as whole, these individual benefits add up to enhance competitiveness for the benefit of the company itself or the organization in improving their objectives, fostering collaboration, and enhancing their implementation and execution of processes. Establishing partnering relationships with suppliers or customers is a process that should be undertaken in a systematic way. Haphazardly formed relationships based on half-hearted commitments are worse than having no partnerships at all. So we are provided here with a model that can be used as a guide in the formation of partnering relationships with both external and internal suppliers and customers. So first we have to develop a partnering briefing. So partnering is about creating cooperative alliances that before trying to establish such an alliance, a partnering briefing must be developed to make sure everyone involved understand partnering as a concept. Second one, we have to identify potential partners. So any external or internal supplier or customer is a potential partner. Choose partners in an order determined by how much value the partnership can have towards enhancing quality, productivity, and competitiveness. So, internal partnerships between the design and manufacturing departments have considerable potential in this regard. Partnerships between the manufacturing department and major external suppliers also have excellent potential. Third, we have to identify key decision makers. So in every organization, unit, department, etc., there are key people whose support is needed to make an initiative involving their organization work. So we have to identify these key decision makers in an in any organization considered a potential partners. So their support must be won if a successful partnership is to be formed. Next, we have to conduct a partnering briefing. So we should call a meeting of the key decision makers in both the organization, yours and the potential partners. So we have to present a briefing explaining the partnering concept with time built in for discussion and questions. This briefing should answer such questions as the following, like how much can we mutually benefit from a partnership, or what is expected of each sides. Next is to determine the level of commitment. So after the decision makers have been briefed, we have to gauge their level of commitment. Like, are they willing to commit the partnership for the long term? Or are they willing to make any and all procedural or philosophical changes that may be necessary for the partnership to work? So engaging in this partnership is crucial to every business organization because it will define the kind of relationship that they shall engage and establish throughout their business operations. So next, we have to decide whether there is sufficient commitment. If the key decision makers show noticeable reluctance, they are not likely to make a full commitment to the partnership, meaning there is no need to proceed any further with potential partners who seem reluctant. The better course of action in such a case is to break off further involvement and begin the process again with another potential external partner. However, if the level of commitment is sufficient, proceed to next step in the process. So next we have to identify key operational personnel. If the level of the commitment is sufficient to provide or proceed with the partnership, who are the key people from both organizations needed to put it into operation, we have to ask our personnel needed from marketing, purchasing, engineering, manufacturing, receiving, or accounting. So identify the people who will be needed to put into action the commitment made by executive level decision makers. So next we have to form the partnership team. So the key people identified as part necessary to putting the partnership into operation should be formed into a team. This means that more than just naming them to the team, they must be given opportunities to get to know and trust each other. So the success of the partnership will depend in great measure on the willingness and ability of these teams or team members to work together in a mutually supportive and trusting manner. Then we have to develop a mission statement that the partnership team needs to a clear and concise mission statement so that everyone involved understands what the team is supposed to do. The mission statement should be developed by executive level decision makers from both organizations. So next, we have to develop objectives. So the mission statement is written in general terms. It is translated into more specific terms by objectives. So these objectives should be developed by the partners and ratified by the executive level decision makers of both partnership organizations. So well-written objectives are stated in measurable terms. So we have to be concise and accurate in terms of the quantity, on the level, and the scope of the objectives. Like for example, we have each week 100 low voltage power supplies will be delivered according to a just-in-time schedule. So all power supplies delivered will be free of defects. So uh, the said objectives are specific and measurable. So in the first one, the expected quantity, 100, and the delivery schedule can be both be easily checked. Like also in the second objective, if even one power supply is rejected, the objective has not been accomplished. So we see all such objectives must be agreed to by both partners before being sent forward for ratification by executive level personnel. And lastly, we have to prioritize objectives and begin. It will typically take several objectives to completely translate the mission statement into measurable action. So the importance of these objectives is relative. After priorities have been established and confirmed by executive level personnel, the work necessary to accomplish them begins. So, although all are important, the objectives should be prioritized and listed in order from the most important to the least. So, results should be monitored and appropriate action taken when problems arise. So we now move on to innovative alliances and partnerships. So partnering between and among companies can take many forms. So a group of small and medium-sized companies might form a partnership to save money through consortium buying. So this is a concept wherein two or more companies get together to purchase common items in bulk. By doing so, they gain the cost benefits of size. Another type of partnership involves suppliers and their customers. So, major customers agree to welcome an in-house supplier representative who works with the customer's personnel to continually improve the supplier-customer relationship. So, having an in-house supplier representative gives the customers an advocate who sees firsthand what is needed from the supplier, when, where, and why. So in turn, it allows suppliers to gain first-hand knowledge of how to better serve the customers. Then another type of innovative partnership takes the form of the customer focus group. So this customer focus group is an example of partnership between a supplier and the users of its products or services. Such a focus group consists of customers who are pulled together by a supplier to provide feedback concerning the quality of an existing product or service, or input concerning a proposed product or service. So there are many examples of innovative partnerships in today's highly competitive global marketplace. So to give you an example of some major companies who formed alliances and partnerships with each other, we have Coca-Cola and Nestle that formed a research partnership to develop a line of ready-to-drink teas and coffees. Also, Procter and Gamble and Walmart formed a partnership to better serve their shared customers through improved shipping and receiving procedures. Another, IBM has a formal partnering program called the Business Partner Program, in which IBM and more than 1,000 partners share information of mutual benefit and develop strategies to better serve mutual customers. And last, we have partnerships among automobile manufacturers which are now common. So Ford partners with Mazda and General Motors with Suzuki. So as we can see, to the goal of bettering their performance and gaining revenue and profit, these companies have the um, took the risk of partnering with another major company or a bigger company for them to um, streamline those conflicts that they met during operations and further to establish good relationships for the development and gaining more profit for their company. So next, we will be discussing about internal partnering. So partnering should begin at home, meaning an organization should initiate its partnering efforts internally. So internal partnering occurs at the following three levels. It can be management to employee partnerships, team to team partnerships, and employee to employee partnerships. So the overall purpose of internal partnering is to harness the full potential of the workforce and focus it on the continuous improvement of quality. So internal partnering goes by a number of different names. It has been called employee involvement, employee empowerment, and various other terms. Regardless of what is called, the concept can be defined as creating an environment and establishing mechanisms within it that brings um, managers and employees, teams, and individual employees together in mutually supportive alliances that maximize the human resources of an organization. So the key concept in this said definition are as follows. So we have environment. Does an organization have an environment that is conducive to internal partnerships? So if it does, partnering is welcomed, encouraged, and rewarded. Providing a conducive environment is important, but by itself, it is not enough. We have to go through mechanisms within the environment. Mechanisms must exist through which employees are able to channel their ideas for improvement. Then, these mutually supportive alliances, mutual support within an organization is a much more effective way to achieve continuous improvement than the traditional approach of internal competition among individuals and teams. So while internal competition, somebody within the organization loses. So when this happens, the organization also loses. So um, the last one, we have human resources. So maximizing human resources is essential in total quality setting. So this is how most significant work improvements are made and maintained. So employees and managers can work together as internal partners to continually improve quality and productivity in a variety of ways. So like cross-functional problem solving terms or teams, quality circles, um, problem specific and hawk teams, and even brainstorming sessions. So together they form collaboration, and with that, they function as a team that benefits the organization or the implementation of daily operations as well. Next, we move forward to partnering with suppliers. So, relationships between an organization and its suppliers have traditionally been characterized as adversarial activities such as the low bid process, in which at least one of the and often both parties lose. So rather than working together to find both ways for both um, to win, buyers use their leverage to force suppliers to absorb costs to win the low bid, and suppliers for look for ways to minimize their losses by barely meeting the buyer's specifications. So such relationships will not help either party succeed in the long run in a competitive marketplace. So to understand the rationale for partnering with suppliers, one must first understand the goal. So this goal is to create and maintain a loyal, trusting, reliable relationship that will allow both partners to win while promoting the continuous improvement of quality, productivity, and competitiveness. So not all suppliers can participate in such relationships. In fact, suppliers should be required to qualify to participate because qualifying a supplier shows that it can guarantee that its product will be delivered when and where they are needed in the specified quantities with and without defects. So suppliers who can meet this criteria all of the time meet with the technical requirements to qualify as a partner. Whether they will actually become a partner depends on their level of commitment or the synergism and trust that develop between the buyer and the personnel as well. So successful supplier partnerships require commitment and continual nurturing. So we have here mandatory requirements for supplier partnerships. So first we have uh, the supplier personnel that should meet with buyer personnel the concept of mutual benefit. So it is particularly important for them to meet with buyer personnel who actually use their products so that needed improvements can be identified and made. Next, the price only approach to buyer supplier negotiations should be eliminated. So product features, quality, and delivery concerns should also be part of the negotiations. So the goal um, of the negotiation should be to achieve the optimum deal with price, features, quality, and delivery issues that are all factored in. Next, the quality of supplier products should be guaranteed by the supplier's quality processes. So the buyer should have no need to inspect the supplier products because trust have already been implied from the very start of the partnership process. So the supplier should also fully understand and be able to practice JIT or just in time. Buyers should not need to maintain inventories. And then the last, we have both partners that should be capable of sharing information electronically so that the relationship is not inhibited by paperwork. Now that we are bombarded by so many technological advancements and integration of it to daily operations, electronic data exchange is particularly important for successful JIT or the just in time. So successful partnerships don't just happen overnight. They evolve over time. So according to Poirier and Hauser, this evolution occurs in the stages depicted herein. So we will present the details in the following sections. So first we have the uncertainty and tentativeness. So in this stage, the uncertainty and tentativeness stage, the buyer and seller are likely two people on their first date. So there is interest, but it is tentative and prefaced with uncertainty. Neither party knows exactly what to expect of the other. So at this point, there is no trust between the partners. Next stage, we have the short-term pressures. So the typical short-term pressures that apply in a traditional business setting manifest themselves in this step. So the buyer will be under the usual pressure to cut costs, and then the supplier will be under the usual pressure to increase sales volume. So where both partners will be cautious and initial attempts to begin putting some substance to partnerships will be probing and vague. Next, there is a need for new approaches. So in the need for new approaches stage, the traditional negotiations will be inevitably occur. So the buyer will press for price discounts, improved payments and terms, freight allowances, and other concessions that save it money but cost the supplier. So the supplier will press for higher volume to offset concessions made to the buyer. Then, if either partner has involved total quality conscious personnel, it will draw on them that quality is not being served by this traditional negotiating. So both will begin to realize that a new approach is needed. So if this awareness does not occur, the partnership will lead to failure. Next is the adoption of new paradigms. So in this, both partners explore ways to move toward the concept of mutual benefit. So the key for both partners to accept the principle that absorbing within the partnerships by either the supplier or the buyer gives neither an advantage. The best way to promote competitiveness is both partners to work together to lower costs. This way, this way of new thinking or the paradigm will give the partnership a competitive advantage over other organizations that produce the same product. Next is the awareness of the potential. So both partners become fully aware of the uh, possible benefits that can be realized from the partnership. So the potentials are for a true win-win relationship can now be seen rather than negotiating price concessions and volume increases. Both partners realize that by working together, they can exceed any short-term advantages that might have been realized from these traditional negotiating strategies. Moving forward, we have the adoption of new values. So in the adoption of new values, both partners adapt the new values inherent in a true supplier-buyer partnership. These values include trust, openness, and sharing. So each party trusts um, the other to protect the confidentiality of what they can learn about one another. So both parties accept that more information they share, including financial information, the better prepared they will be they will be able to help one another. And then the last step is the maturation of the partnership or in which partnership has solidified. So a high level of trust and cooperation has been established between the partners. So continuous interfacing between pertinent employees at all levels of both organizations exists now as a fact. So with this, each partner has a strong self-interest in the success of the other partner. So for years, the key issue in supply chain management was increased speed. So get the product produced in the customer's hand as fast as possible. However, like most quality related concepts, supply chain management is still evolving and being improved on as organizations learn more about it and how to best apply it as a concept. So emerging issues in supply chain management include first security. So with the rise of internal terrorism, organizations are being forced to consider the issue of security when selecting suppliers. So companies that do business, for example, within the US government are being forced to comply with the new, more stringent security regulations throughout their supplier chain. So this is especially the case of US companies that do business overseas. Next is the adaptability to and responsiveness. So supply chain management is an ever-changing concept that as an organizations, competitors begin to get better at using the concept and continually improve on its application, other organizations must adapt in order to stay competitive. So consequently, it is important to have the suppliers in the chain that can adapt continually and respond quickly. Next, we are more familiar with the globalization. So it has changed the customer base for many organizations at the top of the supply chain. So as a result, these companies or end organizations are finding that their suppliers and stakeholders must also change accordingly. So large multinational companies that are accustomed to working with large suppliers are finding it necessary to work with much smaller suppliers in order to be responsive to markets in smaller countries throughout the world. So the needs and capabilities of smaller suppliers are different than those of large suppliers. So this is forcing large multinational companies at the top of the supply chain to re-engineer their approach to supply management chain. Next, we have the misalignment of material technologies and product life cycles. So companies that manufacture electromechanical systems, equipment, and devices that are designed with a product life expectancy of 10 to 15 years are finding that the materials and parts they purchase from suppliers or for normal upgrades and maintenance are not available. This is a special case with semiconductors like in Taiwan. So part suppliers might maintain a readily available inventory for just 18 to 36 months. This means that the systems manufacturer is forced to choose one of the following three alternatives, with all of them considered to be bad. So first we have the purchase at the outset a large enough inventory of spare parts to last 12 to 13 years. Next, to divert the valuable time from product development to the engineering of parts, in which more amounts to mortgaging the future, or to locate brokers who are willing to take the risk of maintaining an inventory of unique parts, paying which now means paying extraordinarily high prices for the parts that they are needed. So this is a major supply chain management issue for many existing companies nowadays. Last, we have the transition and crisis management, in which the ability to handle transitions and crises throughout the entire supply chain has become a critical issue for companies at the top of the chain. So in fact, um, this ability can mean the difference between success and failure for companies and organizations as well that can operate on a global level. So, what happens when a critical supplier in the chain suddenly closes its door, or when delivery of critical components is interrupted by a natural disaster or a terrorist act? So, the ability to quickly adjust to this type of crisis throughout the supply chain will be increasingly critical in the future. So from partnering with suppliers, now we go to partnering with customers. So the term customer as used in this section means that the end user of the product in question and any buyer of a supplier's products are there are other uses of the term, of course, but internal customers exist in every organization. However, in this section the term will be used to mean end users and customers of suppliers. So in the context, for example, the customers of an automobile manufacturer might be a customer or consumer who buys one of its models of a car rental agency that purchases its fleet from the manufacturer. So the rationale for forming partnerships with customers in this context is simple. So it is the best way to ensure customer satisfaction which is in turn the best way uh, to be competitive. So to understand this rationale, we have to answer the following questions. So first, who knows better what the customer wants, or your organization or the customer? And then what makes more sense, guessing what customers want or asking them? Can a producer benefit from seeing how its product is used by customers? What costs more? Making design changes early in the product development cycle, or recalling faulty products that have already been produced and purchased by customers. So the answer to these questions form the rationale for partnering with customers. No organization can possibly know better than its customers what the customers want. So customer defined quality is a fundamental um, part of the total quality philosophy. Whether it is best to guess what a customer wants or to ask is obvious. So no organization can afford to squander its resources and in turn its competitive edge guessing what customers want. So organizations should always ask customers what they want. So any organization that produces a product that can benefit from observing how it is used by customers. So by involving customers early in the product development cycle, a manufacturer can make changes inexpensively and with relative ease. So this further along a product is in the development cycle that more costly such changes become. So if modifications are needed after the product is being used by customers, such is in the case of product recalls, the cost cannot be measured in just for us pesos. So additional costs accrue in the form of lost consumer confidence, diminished trust, and a tarnished corporate image. So product defects can be corrected much more easily than a consumer confidence or trust can be restored. So once a consumer might not like the product that this company have been producing, they can all they can um, share it with their colleagues or family, and in turn will scatter the information um, in a manner that any organization or company cannot control anymore. So the customer feedback surveys conducted by mail, either through mail or telephone, is a widely used strategy for measuring customer satisfaction that such surveys have a place. So, however, their after the fact nature limits their usefulness unless they are just one part of a much broader set of strategies implemented a great deal earlier in the process. Customer satisfaction surveys will have only a limited effect on an organization's ability to compete. The, in short, the key to success in partnering with customers is to get them involved early in the product development cycle, like what they want or what specific product they use or available to them. So let them preview the design, allow them to observe and even try the prototype models. Get their feedback at every stage in the product development cycle and make any needed changes um, soon as they are identified. So when this approach is used, customer satisfaction surveys can solicit feedback from a broader audience to verify the input given earlier in the product development cycle. So partnering with potential competitors sounds like an odd strategy on the surface. Why would organizations that compete for business in the same market want to form partnerships? So the rationale for partnering with potential competitors is the same as that for partnering with suppliers and customers, being competitive or competitiveness. So this is a strategy that applies more frequently to small and medium-sized firms, but it can also be used by even the largest organizations and sometimes is. Like for example, the leading computer companies in the United States may form a partnership to develop the next technological breakthrough before a similar team in Japan, Germany, or some other country that beats them to it. So small and medium-sized enterprises or the SMEs don't typically develop major technological breakthroughs. However, there are many ways in which SMEs can work together to enhance their competitiveness in spite of being competitors in the same markets. The most widely practiced type of among SMEs is the manufacturing networks. So a manufacturing network is a group of individual SMEs that cooperate in ways that increase their quality, productivity, and resultant competitiveness to levels beyond what the individual members' companies could achieve by themselves. So this concept originated in Europe after the World War II, and it is still practiced extensively in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy and in Denmark. So these countries applied the concept to rebuild their manufacturing bases after the devastation of the World War II, when resources were sufficient to allow manufacturers to rebuild independent of one another. So consequently, um, rather than trying to completely retool and restaff independently, companies formed networks and shared both human and technological resources. So, manufacturing network were originally conceived as a way um, to rebuild. They have evolved since into a way to compete, particularly for um, SMEs. Now, with these flexible manufacturing networks, these are alliances of um, SME or small and medium-sized manufacturing firms that collaborate in ways that make the individual members more competitive. So the concept is based on bringing together firms that have offsetting strengths and weaknesses so that each member reinforces the others, allowing the network to undertake projects that none of the individual firms would be able to attempt alone. So by networking in this way, smaller firms can gain economy of scale without losing the benefits of speed, rapid response, and flexibility. So manufacturing networks began to appear in the United States in the 1980s. So the earliest known network in the United States is the Garment Industry Development Center established in New York City in 1984. So we have this figure here shows the illustrating industrial clusters with networks in the United States. So this further shows that broad industrial clusters in which manufacturing networks can be found in the United States. So of these, the greatest number of networks can be found um, in metalworking, woodworking, and textile industries. So we are talking about network then, the joint activities in which networks va- participate vary a great deal depending on the local objectives. So each some of the most widely practiced joint activities of manufacturing network in the United States are being illustrated in this form. So we have production in which network SMBs are able to pursue larger production contracts than any individual member company could undertake alone. So through teaming arrangements and the work and the financing of it are divided among network members as cooperate. as appropriate. So the technology, like for example, the technology cost, manufacturing and engineering network, or the TechMen in Fort Walton Beach in Florida, under the uh, undertakes joint projects and its members that work together to meet joint needs as such as training. So the member organizations are the Department of Defense contractors that design and manufacture electromechanical technologies that by participating in TechMen projects, individual members are able to pursue larger more and more complex contracts than they could attempt alone. Next, we have education and training. So education and training are often a problem for SMEs. On the one hand, employees need ongoing education and training to continually improve quality, productivity, and competitiveness. On the other hand, they face the following problems, like difficulty in giving employees time off for education and training and still meeting production schedules, difficulty in convincing educational institutions that typically need 15 to 20 students to form a class to bring on course on site, and also high expense for education because they do not get the substantial registration discounts that large firms get when participating in training provided by private training firms. So by partnering SMEs can solve all of these problems through economy of scale. So although giving employees time off for training will always be difficult, it can be made easier through sharing employees by network members on a reciprocal basis. Then by bringing together all employees for member companies who need a certain type of training, networks can produce classes large enough to attract educational institutions and to qualify for discounts from private training providers. Like the one we have uh, mentioned earlier, the Government Industry Development Corporation, or the GIDC in New York City, is an example of a network that provide joint training opportunities. Next, we have marketing. So marketing is the widely practiced joint activity among manufacturing network of SMEs. Typically, the joint capabilities of the network are what is marketed. Member companies share the cost of producing marketing tools such as brochures, videos, and promotional materials, of attending trade shows, and of marketing personnel and related expenses such as travel. So next we have product development. In these, developing new products can be too expensive an undertaking for SMEs. So it typically involves such activities as research, design, market analysis, competition analysis, prototype production, performance testing, and test marketing. The costs associated with these activities can be prohibitive for an individual SME. However, when the cost can be divided among network members, product development becomes a more feasible network. Next is the technology transfer. So technology is a physical manifestation of knowledge. So technology transfer is the movement of technology from one arena to another. The form of technology transfer that is most readily and widely recognized is the transfer of a new technology from a research laboratory to a production setting. So this is often referred to as technology commercialization. And another aspect of technology transfer is the movement of a commercialized technology into the hands of users, often referred to as technology diffusion. So after it has been diffused, technology must be properly used to realize its potential benefits. Proper use of technology, as we all know, requires knowledge. So knowledge sharing is the approach networks use to promote effective technology transfer. So an example of how technology sharing is applied is provided when, if we are familiar with the Heat Trading Network Incorporated of Cleveland, Ohio, in which one of the partners in this network is the Edison Material Technology Center, or the MTech. So the MTech provides a free hotline that HTN members can access for assistance in solving heat treatment problems. So the hotline is the primary vehicle for information sharing. So the last one, we have the purchasing. One of the most productive applications of the economy of scale gained from networking is in purchasing. So SMEs working alone are not able to enjoy the cost savings that large firms achieve by purchasing bulk quantities of expendable materials and other necessities such as the insurance. So however, by jointly purchasing necessities, network SMEs can achieve similar cost savings. Like for example, members of the um, another U.S. company, the Metalworking Connection Incorporated in Alabama, jointly purchases casualty insurance, thereby saving between 20 to 30% cost of premiums. So next we have this global partnering. So the partnering concept, like all the contemporary business concept, has a global aspect. Companies that market the to customers worldwide should examine the possibility of partnering with suppliers also worldwide, so that in some cases the government of the host country will actually mandate supplier partnerships as an economic quid pro quo. So this arrangement is often the case in non-democratic countries, that government-mandated partnerships are not recommended here because they might be driven by more political than business considerations. However, in countries with sound business are where businesses are free to develop partnerships based on the sound business principles rather than politics, the same rules apply as those set forth earlier for domestic partnerships. Though modern transportation and telecommunication technologies make geographic separation a manageable issue, but the latter technologies do not take place of on-site visits to the facilities of partners, nor do they replace face-to-face interactions with global customers. So a one-size-fits-all product will not suffice in the global marketplace. Local on-the-ground interaction with both suppliers and customers is critical in gearing up for product design. No designer, planner, or manufacturer in the United States can possibly understand all the cultural nuances or country-specific preferences of people from other nations. To put it in another way po, product attributes that are popular in, for example, United States may not be in another country, such as in China or in the Philippines. Consequently, access to suppliers and customers in this country is critical. But by partnering, but through the process of partnering, it is the best way to gain necessary access. So, and the last concept of partnership is the education and business partnerships. So, two of the most important factors in continually improving the performance of an organization are the quality of employees and the quality of human interaction with technology. So, organizational performance must first improve their people and the interaction of their people with process of technologies. Individuals who lack fundamental work skills cannot perform at globally competitive levels, and people who lack process skills cannot get the most out of technologies available to them. Like for example, a person who cannot solve general uh, al- algebraic equations will be unable to learn statistical process control, and the person who uses a word processing system as if it were a typewriter will not get the most out of this technology. So the need to continually improve employees' work skills is the primary force driving business and education partnerships. So in such partnerships, educational institutions provide on-site customized training, technical assistance, and consulting services to help organizations continually improve their people and their processes. So they also provide workshops and seminars and facilitate focus groups. So partnering with business and industry has become a common practice for institutions of higher education. Report, I'd like to leave a quote from John D. Rockefeller Jr. stating, "A friendship founded on business is better than a business founded on friendship." Though these do not particularly mean that friendships can't be beneficial in business. In fact, strong personal relationships can often lead to successful business partnerships. However, it is crucial to maintain a clear distinction between personal and professional relationships to ensure that the business remains the primary focus. So, in conclusion, partnerships are essential for achieving organizational excellence within the framework of total quality management. In fact, by fostering collaboration, sharing knowledge, and leveraging diverse resources, organizations can create a more robust and sustainable quality culture. Those strategic partnerships, businesses can uh, enhance innovation, reduce costs, and improve customer satisfaction. It ultimately drives long-term success. So this is why organizations and businesses embrace the power of partnerships in order for them to elevate their organizations to new heights of quality and performance. So that concludes my presentation. I hope everyone has learned so much about partnerships under the planning phase within total quality management. Thank you po.